What's next?
Right. I think it's time to get serious. It's time to get upset.
Okay.
It's time to talk about McLaren. Yeah. So this is a bit more of, I'm sure, a joint talking point, because I no doubt this will be on your list of things to talk about as well. So very briefly, what started off to be a pretty terrible weekend for McLaren ended that way as well, with neither driver scoring points for the first race this year. It was P14 for Daniel and P15 for Lando after a race to forget. I didn't actually see them switch towards the end of the race. I thought Lando was ahead for the majority of it, but clearly after the safety car, something happened between those two, or they just switched positions. I'm not sure what happened. First of all, McLaren rolled the dice very early on in the race with an alternative strategy, because they were the only cars starting on the medium tyre, whereas everyone else was on the soft. That looked like instantly quite a bad decision, because they both dropped positions after the first couple of laps and were pretty much, I can't remember what positions they were in going into the first couple of laps, but they dropped a couple of positions.
Ricardo was last. Ricardo was dead last at the end of lap 1.
And Lando wasn't far off it after a couple of laps. But I think that was more to do with the tyre choice than the pace of the car. I think that was just a bad strategy call. And we're going to get these strange strategy calls as well when you've got cars at the back of the grid, and you can, each and every driver now can have a fresh set of tyres, whatever tyre they want to run. I think, it's a whole new ball game. But it didn't get much better. And the comparison I made was, there are 8 Mercedes engines or 8 Mercedes-driven cars on the grid. You've got Mercedes, Aston Martin, Williams, and and McLaren. And at some points during this race, 6 of those cars, everyone apart from Mercedes, was at the back 6 of the pecking order. They were from P14 to P20, all Mercedes cars. Apart from the 2 Mercedes drivers who were, P7 and 8 or whatever they were doing, the rest of the cars were alternative powered engines. So when I hand over to you, we're going to talk about McLaren as a whole and what they've done. And obviously they look quite positive coming out of Barcelona and in Bahrain. But do you think, this is a second question for you, do you think this is a McLaren problem, or do you think this is a Mercedes engine problem, and now the responsibility and the pressure is on Mercedes to fix or upgrade or produce a better engine, which isn't going to happen in the next race? It might not happen in the next 2 or 3 races. They've only got a certain amount of engines they can use this year, and they want to get it right. But is it a McLaren problem, or is it a Mercedes problem, or is it both?
Yeah, it's got to be a bit of both, really, hasn't it? Starting with Mercedes, there's some indication that Mercedes might have the weakest engine at the moment, because the clearest one for me was right at the beginning. Hamilton got an amazing start and got away really well and was closing up on Sainz to go for it. But then once they were, a little bit away, say a third of the way down the straight, and were really starting to go up the gears, Sainz just started disappearing. So Hamilton had got this way better start and was getting as much of a slipstream as anyone else around him. And the Ferrari just pulled away as if the engine just wasn't there. It just wasn't keeping up. Or maybe it's the drag of the car. I don't really know. But the engine definitely plays the biggest part there. And I thought that was pretty surprising to see. Compare this to Ferrari, where only one of the 6 Ferrari-powered cars was out of the top 10 by the end. Meanwhile, all the cars that got lapped were Mercedes-powered. So, and the only real engine change this season is the requirement for, they have some requirement for 10% sustainable ethanol, yes. I think it is.
Yep.
I'm not really sure what the implications of that are. If anyone is engineering-minded and knows what that means for the engines, then let us know. But otherwise, the engines, I think, are frozen until at least 2025. So, of course, this would happen the season after McLaren start using Mercedes engines. It's Honda all over again. I remember Ron Dennis saying, this is why if you're a customer team, you can't win titles, because you're always going to be at a disadvantage. And this is why we're going to partner up with Honda and create this partnership. And then they were rubbish for a really long time. So I'm a bit worried that that's going to happen again. But then McLaren have to take some stick for that as well, because the car looked pretty understeery, and neither driver seemed particularly happy with it. Neither driver really seemed to have a handle on the car. And whilst, yes, there are going to be various aspects of the engine that you don't really have a lot of control over or a lot of customizability over, because you're not the ones making the engines. And in some cases, the gearboxes and various other things as well. You've still got the Mercedes cars themselves looking much stronger. So you've got a fellow powered car to compare yourself to, and the Mercedes and McLaren were occasionally kind of close, nearing certain points of last season. So to then suddenly be that far away, well, that's got to be the team, surely.
Yeah. It's a great detail you went into there. I completely agree. It's a massive shame, isn't it? Coming from last year, and McLaren have been on this really positive trajectory for the last 3 or 4 years, coming from when they had that black livery or that that McLaren Honda livery, and they were at the back of the grid, and now they've slowly moved up to the midfield. And then last year they were competing for third place. I mean, they secured third place in 2020 and then dropped to fourth in 2021. This year, a lot of people thought McLaren could be fighting Ferrari again. McLaren could be up against the Mercedes. This is amazing. And I'm not going to lie, a little bit of me hung on to that hope after qualifying. I was like, oh, maybe it's just a bad qualifying session. Hopefully, these guys can push forward during the race with a really good strategy. Maybe their race pace is so much better than their qualifying pace. But it just wasn't the case at all for either. And it was such a shame.
There was no pace.
There was no pace at all. It's going to be weeks before we see any alternative upgrades coming in, especially from the Mercedes, because you can't just roll out a new engine in a week's time for Saudi Arabia. You can't just do that. So they're going to be struggling next week. And you're only limited to 3 engines a year, aren't you? So Mercedes
I'm not really sure what they can do with the engines, though, because it's my understanding that the whole thing is sort of frozen and that there's I don't really know what it is you can do. Maybe there are some changes you can make to software and, the computery side of things, maybe.
Well, maybe because the Ferrari seems to be really good at low speed. It seems to be really good at handling low speed corners, and that's where they had such a massive advantage this weekend. Whereas the Mercedes, they openly said their low speed corner trajectory is shocking. It is really bad. They can't handle low speed corners at all. And obviously Mercedes have got that porpoising issue still, whereas McLaren
looked really bad at times, didn't it? That porpoising on the Mercedes.
It really did. And that's something which McLaren didn't really have problems with in the second half of testing either.
I was really positive
no
about that.
porpoising issue. And it was like, oh, maybe they've got a massive advantage over some competitors because they haven't got these issues. They had that brake issue obviously going into practice and after testing, but they brought new brake upgrades and that seemed to have temporarily fixed the issue. They're still trying to understand it, but it wasn't the braking which was causing them issue. We didn't see them very often lock up into turn 1. Where they have done throughout the whole of 3 practice. It was just the pace and, well, I don't know what else there is to add.
They seem to have some cooling issues as well. I think Ricciardo is being told to do various things to keep engine bits cool and the like, so that may have been a factor as well. But
what team was it who got told not to come into the pits because the engine because it was too hot? Did you hear that radio call? I can't remember for the life of me.
No, I don't.
There was a team which was due to box, and then they came on the pit radio, and they were like, "No, you have to do another lap to cool the engine or to cool the tires or whatever it was because it's too hot."
Not sure.
I'll find out and I'll pop it on the Twitter page referencing this video. But yeah, that if you've got anything else to add to McLaren, that's all from me. Just a pretty disappointing. That's a real disappointing weekend.
Yeah, the whole thing took on the appearance of an extended test. Trying out these different tyres, and Ricciardo went on to the softs after 17 laps, so he was pitting not too long after some people had done on softs. I mean, Stroll did 18 laps on softs, and most other people were 14 or 15, so he wasn't long after that, so the mediums didn't really help out there at all. Norris managed a bit longer on the mediums, but that actually seemed to hurt him more in the long run because he switched to hards, whereas Ricciardo went to softs. And then, so you can see how it looked like a test.
Yeah.
Because you basically got one car and one tyre. They were basically seeing how the car was reacting to the tyres. And that was the point at which I realised they're just seeing what it's like now.
They've written off this race.
Yeah, so it's just... And then Ricciardo went onto the hards and lasted 11 laps because there was a safety car. So then both cars went onto softs after Norris had switched to softs only 4 laps prior to that. But then they put another set of softs. It was all over the place. And they were obviously just seeing how the car reacted to different tyres. And they were just getting more data, I think, because, yeah, it was pretty clear very early on McLaren were going absolutely nowhere and were basically battling Williams at the back. And it was just, it was rubbish. But, we've got a soldier on, got faith in the team. So it's just one of those things, isn't it? Like it's not like I haven't been here before. So
welcome back.
So it's not nice to be back. Not thank you for having me.